Good morning, scholars, and welcome to another virtual online instructional video with Mr. Marambo and our special guest here today, Snoopy, our fake Chihuahua. It is Thursday, April 2nd, and today for our lesson, we are continuing our project on the zoo exhibit, and that's why we have Snoopy volunteering as our brave model for today. To get us started, let's go ahead and navigate ourselves into the Google Classroom. Our goal today is the same as yesterday's goal. We will be able to apply criteria and constraints to an engineering challenge pertaining to an organism in a zoo exhibit. And yesterday, I explained the entire project to you all. So if you need a refresher on what this project with the zoo exhibit and your organism is all about, go ahead and check out the last video. Since you're already watching this video, let's go ahead and move on to our second step, and that's opening your zoo project from yesterday's class. So it should look a lot like this. My document is empty right now, but these are the following sections that should already be filled out. You've identified your organism, which was your organism in your last project. This is the organism that you're going to put on show in a zoo, in your zoo exhibit. If you scroll down a little bit more, you'll find a section about criteria for a successful, meaning this is good, a successful exhibit at the zoo. You should have already filled out at least 3 on the zoo's point of view of criteria for a successful exhibit, and also 3 criteria from the organism's point of view for a successful exhibit at the zoo. Again, if you're lost in any kind of way, please refer back to the previous video. We had Snoopy share a model of how it looks like to see criteria from the zoo's point of view and also from an organism's point of view as well. This section, which is constraints, should also be filled out. 3 on the zoo's point of view and also 3 other constraints on the organism's point of view. Today, we are scrolling into this next section titled Engineering Problems for a Successful Exhibit at the Zoo, and also our reflections on our engineering problems. The first thing we have to understand, and I mentioned this in a previous video when I used the example of me on crutches, is that science and engineering works together. After looking at our engineering basics lesson, we should have concluded that engineers use science to design solutions to their problems or challenges. And scientists like us use engineering to design ways to answer our scientific questions. Here we can see the intertwining relationship between engineering, creating stuff, and science, that field full of possibility, potential, and curiosity to change the world. But let's bring it back down to our zoo exhibit project and look at the criteria and constraints for a successful exhibit of your organism at the zoo. The main thinking question here is what engineering problems might exist in the creation of a zoo that exhibits our organism. So for my example, I had the Chihuahua as my organism, and let's say Snoopy here is that Chihuahua. So using the criteria and constraints that I've identified, and you're gonna do this yourself too with your organism, what engineering problems do I come across if I'm gonna create a successful space, a space that can bring in money, that's a zoo's point of view, and also keep the organism alive, which is the organism's point of view. This is where we're bringing yesterday's lesson and work into play as we're now thinking about, okay, if I'm an engineer building the place where my organism is going to be, what are some challenges that I will run into? And those challenges come from putting the criteria we set for ourselves and the criteria we also have for our organism. Zoo versus organism. This is also weaving into play the constraints we have for ourselves as the zoo and the constraints we also have for the organism as well. So let me give you an example so that we can see what an engineering challenge looks like in real life using the Chihuahua as our organism. If one of my criteria as a zoo is to make sure as many people are able to see Snoopy the Chihuahua in order to bring me revenue, and another criteria that Snoopy has as an organism is that he needs a lot of space in order to live and run around in, one of my engineering challenges may be, how do I build a space that's large enough to fit Snoopy in, but also large enough to fit as many people as I can? Obviously, there's not enough space in the world where I can have both things satisfied. So as an engineer, I'm going to have to think, okay, I need a lot of room for Snoopy, but I also need a lot of room for people to see Snoopy. That's how the zoo makes its money. How do the two compromise? Dealing with the same criteria and possibly the same constraint as the zoo, because more space that I need to make for Snoopy means what? More money that a zoo has to spend in order to create that. A related engineering problem could be, not only do I need enough space for him to run around, I need space for him to actually eat, because Snoopy, one of the criteria for Snoopy is that he has a specific diet. And that also plays into one of his constraints. One of his constraints also is that that diet is very difficult to obtain. It's expensive and it's also very hard to get. So not only do I have to provide a space where he could get that food as a zoo, I need to think about that. As an engineer, I gotta think about that. I also need to think about the cost it would be in order to provide that sort of food for Snoopy. So the second engineering challenge, on top of the space he needs to run around free and the space I need to bring as many people as I can to see Snoopy, is how much space will it take to put the food in with Snoopy, because he has a particular diet to eat. Because that space for just food, think about it like a feeding pen for pigs, Snoopy needs a space for his food. That also is another factor that tussles with, that conflicts with the amount of people that are able to see the organism, to see Snoopy. Because the more space this bad boy takes up, the less space I have for customers. And the less space I have for customers, what? The less money the zoo is able to make. That does not fit into my criteria. That appeals or goes into one of my constraints as a zoo, which is the limited amount of money I have. And space is just one of the many challenges, engineering challenges we come across when trying to weave into the criteria and constraints we have of the zoo, who's motivated by money, and by the organism, who's motivated to survive and stay alive. Some of these examples, other than the amount of space I need to create for the organism and the zoo, may include, how do I do the advertising for this organism? If, let's say, for example, the Chihuahua wasn't popular, I need to create maybe even toys or playgrounds that's entertaining for my customers inside that zoo exhibit. Kind of like how a monkey plays around with different toys, or sometimes when you see penguins have slides. I, as an engineer, if the Chihuahua isn't popular, I need to start thinking as the zoo and say, I need to put some toys in that zoo exhibit so that my customers can be satisfied and they bring in more money. This is the sort of creative thinking we're engaging in, and we're identifying at least three engineering problems or challenges like the ones I just modeled and Snoopy just helped out into this section right here. After that, scroll to the bottom, and this is this last section for today, reflecting on your engineering problems, or what we also sometimes call challenges. And it's just asking you, does your organism have any needs that you think may be difficult to replicate in a zoo, and why? And the second question asks, does the zoo have any needs that you think might be difficult to meet with your organism? So if we're using Snoopy as a Chihuahua example, yes, there are some needs that are difficult to replicate or copy in my zoo. Those needs include simulating or copying the natural environment that Snoopy, the Chihuahua, is used to. Because as we know from our previous video, Snoopy needs a lot of room. And those are needs that might be difficult to replicate or make a copy of in a zoo because we have limited space. My zoo don't got enough money to buy so much room. This is a constraint and something that makes our engineering problem a huge challenge. And that's what you do for the first question under reflecting on your engineering problems. You summarize our engineering problems and challenges up here with your organism and place them with the first question, focusing on your organism and its criteria and constraints. Your second question focuses on your zoo, not the organism, the zoo and its criteria and constraints. And it reads again, does the zoo have any needs that you might think may be difficult to meet with your organism? So if Snoopy isn't a popular organism, like people aren't crazy going to see a Chihuahua in a zoo, one of those challenges that a zoo might have difficulty with is making a Chihuahua entertaining. And again, the engineering problem I indicated there is maybe we put up some toys so that a Chihuahua can do tricks people haven't seen. Maybe that's how we put some money into the zoo's pocket. But that may be difficult to implement because what kind of toys do we need? What kind of playground do we need? We don't know. But that is something the zoo must think of in order to meet the needs, the criteria we've set for the zoo. And that is the second reflection question. Once we've completed that, go ahead. You're now finished with a lot of sections of your project. Don't need to turn it in right now because it's due a bit later, but open the exit ticket. Should look a lot like this. Just 2 questions, submit it, done, and you're good for today. Thank you so much for watching this video. I greatly appreciate you taking the time to learn a bit more about engineering challenges and how they apply to a zoo exhibit. I know Snoopy got a kick out of this video session being more the star of the show, and hopefully you learned a bit something new today. If you have any questions, make sure to reach out to me during my office hours. I'm more than happy to accelerate and improve upon your own learning. But without further ado, have a great rest of your day. Enjoy the time you have. Keep yourself safe and yourself healthy. Love you all, and goodbye.